What are the challenges and aspirations of young people in Marawi? Let's listen to three voices who have experienced witnessing conflict, taking part in rehabilitation, and building peace. I'm Nicole Curato, and welcome to another episode of Meet The Millennials. Joining us today are Rimar Alonsagay, a Tri-People youth organizer, Abdullah Ahmad, a youth Peacebuilder, and Tasi Abdul Rao from the Young Moro Professionals Network. And we're here because we're millennials at Poblacion in Makati at the Commune Cafe. So thank you all for joining us. And both of you flew in from Marawi just yesterday. So thank you for taking time to be part of this conversation. And I must admit that this episode is pretty special, pretty important to me because my father grew up in Butuan. He was in the pilot class of Mindanao State University, Marawi, in the political science program. But being raised in Manila, growing up here, I feel like I don't know enough about the region beyond what we are taught in textbooks. And looking at it in hindsight, it feels like what I learned was incomplete, if not unfair. So I think that has to change, and it's a good time to change all of these misperceptions and stereotypes. So let's start with Rimar. Tell us your story.
For that, Miss Nicole, I wanted to raise three points there. First is, I'm a victim of a false narrative, no? Kasi nung bata, we were taught na huwag mo lumapit sa mga Muslim or dapat umuwi ng gabi kasi kukunin ka ng mga Muslim. And this is a false narrative, no, that espouses, and these are shared by many people, young people in Mindanao, particularly the migrant settlers, no. So we were victims by this narrative na hindi ka dapat lumapit, and this actually gives me courage to learn more about different communities, different cultures in Mindanao. Second point I wanted to raise is that young people in Mindanao face multiple burdens, no? Nandyan yung displacement. Kasi particularly in the southern part of Mindanao, they're prone in the conflict-driven areas, no? Young people have been experienced displacement, ongoing displacement because of the militarization, paramilitary operations, at saka yung mga insurgency groups, no? And this displacement distracted their normalcy, no? Like increasing of out of school youth, no? And also nawawala yung identity nila kapag nadi-displace sila sa kanilang bahay. So aside from that is yung lack of economic opportunities, lalong-lalo na sa mga rural areas sa Mindanao, especially young people. May issue ngayon yung diaspora out-migration ng mga kabataan ng young farmers sa rural areas. So yung tanong dito, sino na ang mga second liner na mga farmers? And aside from that, yung social discrimination sa mga indigenous people and the Muslim, no, and this is being structured or being spouses in Mindanao. And the third I want to raise is, aside from these multiple burdens or issues, no, na fini-face ng mga kabataan sa Mindanao, is may shared aspirations yung mga kabataan. Yung mga kabataan, lalo yung mga tri-people na kabataan, they shared aspiration on inclusive peace, social justice, no. I'm part of a tri-people organizations, and we will make sure that the young people are frontliner of these aspirations for inclusive peace.
And of course, Rimar, you have a very interesting story because you were born in Maguindanao and then you moved to Marawi. And Tasi's story is a bit different because you were born in Marawi and then you moved to Butuan, Cebu, in Manchester in the United Kingdom, and then you moved to Manila and now as a law student. So what's the story here? Ang dami mong nilipatan. Rimar was talking about displacement, forced displacement, yung mga kabataan or millennials na hindi naman talaga ginustong umalis ng Mindanao, but your story is a bit different.
Yes, that's true, Ms. Nicole. The Moro youth have different narratives, or we are not homogeneous. We have different life experiences. In my case, my family went where my father's career went, so that was in Butuan, then Cebu, and in Manila. But that was a good opportunity for me to be exposed to non-Muslim areas and still face the challenge of preserving my identity as a Muslim and as a Maranao, wherever I was, and that was a good opportunity that when I lived here in Manila, I was able to find my fellow Moro youth and be part of the Young Moro Professionals Network, transcend our differences in different tribes, whether you're Tausug, Maguindanao, Iranon, Maranao. We combine together, build synergy to support the peace process, the peace building efforts, and that was really a fulfilling years for us to work together. And again, as mentioned, it's a challenge to sustain that voluntary spirit of being a collective youth, bringing up the concerns and the voice of the youth.
Yeah. And I think that's an important message that when we talk about the Moro youth, it's not just one story. There are so many different stories embedded in this narrative. And I'd like to turn to Ahmad because, of course, you are a youth peace builder. And, of course, you also hear a lot about criticisms and comments against millennials. We're always criticized for many things. Anong karanasan mo dito?
Mostly people would say these millennials have a negative connotation. So when you hear or when you see people gathering and they're like this, very noisy in the street, disorganized, and these are the kind of people who just want to do what they want to like, anything that pleases them. People who just say kasi millennial or the idea na nililimit yung anong kayang ipakita o gawin ng isang millennial. Hanggang doon lang sa pagiging paglalakwat siya, disorganized. Pero what they don't know, marami silang capacity. These people also are creative. They have creative minds, they can transform it into actions. And yun yung natatakpan, hindi napapakita kasi doon nas-stuck sila doon, nako-cover up ng pagiging loud nila, yung capacity nila as a youth.
Yeah, I think it's nice to end the first segment there, that millennials are creative, that they can also be agents of peace. So when we return, we will talk about the role of the youth in peace building. Stay tuned. You're still watching Meet the Millennials, and with us today are Rimar, Ahmad, and Tassie. So thank you for joining us once again. So Rimar, we were in Marawi a few days ago and we were talking about the role of youth in peace building. And one of the most important things I learned from you is that when we talk about the role of the youth in peace building, nakakalimutan na they're very much part of peace building. Usually, young people are considered victims, powerless victims, or even perpetrators of conflict. So I think I'd like to bring in Ahmad's voice here. Since this is your job, you have a lot of experiences as a youth peace builder. What exactly does peace building mean?
You know, Miss Nicole, I've spent my entire life in Marawi City. So I've been there, and living in a conflict-affected areas, living in a war-torn city, made me realize that this is the time that all the more we need peace building. We need to focus our energies to build peace among us. Because when I was a child, just like Brother Rimar, I wasn't that much oriented about non-Muslims. So people other than outside my belief, I consider completely strangers, and I would ask myself, who are they? Why are they like this and like that? And then growing up, when I had my early education until I graduated high school, I had a privilege to meet other people outside my belief. I knew their lifestyles, their cultures. I even made friends with them. So with that, I had an awareness already, and I had the growing realization that our differences should not divide us. In fact, we should look for our commonalities for us to respect and accept each other. Because if we continually dwell in looking at the differences of people, walang mangyayari sa atin. Walang mangyayari. Parang ang magiging ending is, eto kami, ganyan kayo. Pero if we try to look at the core of our being as humans, makikita natin kung ano yung mga things na we can share together. makikita natin, if we learn to be friends, know each other, makikita natin yung, mapuprove natin. We can prove that though it's difficult, but it's possible to mingle, to be friends with other people outside our culture, outside our religions. So siguro my main point on that is to keep looking, to respect our differences as persons, as individuals, despite our religion, our race, our clans, and to appreciate our commonalities as persons. Because from that, dun tayo makakapagsimula para maisulong or magkaroon ng kapayapaan among us all.
So that's an important point in the sense that you're making an emphasis about our role as individuals to learn to respect the differences, the other beliefs of our fellow Filipinos. But of course, at the heart of this also is the peace process led by the government and the Bangsamoro community. And so I'd like to bring in Tassie in the conversation because you have been a witness to the signing of major peace agreements when you were still working for OPAP. How does that feel like? What is that experience like?
I feel like it was really a privilege to be part of that historic milestones in the Philippine history, because of course we know that the conflict in Mindanao spanned for the previous decades, so it didn't happen overnight, and it was not resolved overnight. But with that privilege also comes responsibility that you just do not witness the signing of a peace agreement, but you actively participate and aspire to contribute to the realization of these agreements. So even after working in the peace process, you can contribute in a lot of peace building efforts, because peace building and promoting empowerment and progress in these poverty-stricken, conflict-affected areas is intertwined. So even in the area of promoting investments or promoting livelihood in these areas is very important. So and aside from that, talking about millennials and the youth, the challenge now is sustaining the efforts of youth organizations, especially those civil society, voluntary work kind of organizations, that you continue to inspire youth to actively participate and be socially aware, be immersed in the issues confronting our people, especially those not proximate to us, those on the ground, those in rural areas, especially, for example, Marawi, where thousands of displaced families are still suffering from the conflict that happened. So we're grateful that there are peace builders who continue to value the importance of peace building, that it may be not a very glamorous work compared to other professions, that they bring their heart and soul in the work that they do for contributing to society.
To be critical about the peace settlement or the political settlement, because almost of the political settlement are middle track, like panel to panel, like GPH and MNF panel. So nandito yung tanong kung saan ba dito or yung espasyo or space ng mga community, particularly sa mga young people, kasi nakikita dito sa any political settlement, nagiging beneficiaries na lang yung mga kabataan or yung mga communities. With regard to the Marawi rehabilitation, kasi matagal na ako nasa Marawi, nakikita ko yung mga interventions ng mga civil society organizations at saka yung gobyerno. Mas nakikita ko that the civil society organizations are more engaged to young people para pag-usapan yung pagkapayapaan, yung peace building initiatives, no? They are more engaged to young people. But hindi masyado emphasize sa interventions ng gobyerno or yung formal institutions yung mga kabataan. Kasi I attended 2 consultations sa Lanao del Sur, and same sentiments, no? Hindi na representation lang yung nandun, integrations, pero yung mga kabataan sa Lanao del Sur, they wanted to be the frontliner of the peace process or in the post-conflict reconstruction.
I think that's an important point to just keep discussing. So I think we can pick that up when we return. Let's talk about what we can do together as millennials to contribute to the peace process. Stay tuned. You're still watching Meet the Millennials here on CNN Philippines, and we've been talking about the aspirations and issues faced by the youth in Marawi. And I think this is a timely conversation because 2 years ago, President Duterte declared the liberation of Marawi from IS-inspired militants. Tumatawa kayo because some of our colleagues also actually challenged that narrative and said, liberation ba talaga or baka occupation pa of Marawi? And I think we have to keep that conversation going. But I think for this final segment, we all agreed to talk about what we as young people, as millennials, can do to be an active part of the peace process. So let's start with Tassie. As member of the Young More Professionals Network, what exactly can you do to contribute to the peace process?
Any individual or whatever profession you have, I believe that it's important for a person to reflect on what peace means to him or to her. What do you picture with society having peace and justice? And it's important that the person connect with that because there's no one way definition of how you can contribute to peace, because there's a lot of way to contribute to peace, and peace and progress are really connected. So if you want to contribute to addressing the health concerns, the education concerns, the needs of the marginalized, that all contributes to peace. So it's important to underline that it's not enough to want peace. You have to be actively participating to it, contributing to it. Be active participants in peace building and governance.
Of course, it's easy to feel disappointed, especially when we experience setbacks. So I think I could draw inspiration from Rimar in your work as a volunteer, especially with Tri-People community. I think my skeptical self would say, may pag-asa pa ba talaga? Parang lahat naman ng naunang henerasyon sinabi, ito yung aspirations namin for Mindanao, pero tingnan natin yung nangyayari ngayon. So what's the situation?
I think first, with regard to, we need to interrogate yung rehabilitation, yung post-conflict rehabilitation sa Marawi. Kasi sa nakikita natin, may conflict or contested aspirations yung gobyerno na which is very secular aspiration siya na they wanted to modernize Marawi. At least on the other hand, makikita mo yung aspiration ng mga tao. Yeah, they wanted na may religious at saka cultural identity pa rin yung rehabilitation. At yung sa conflicting parts ay sa conflicting aspiration nun, malaking gap kasi hindi napapakinggan yung mga tao sa baba. Yung talaga yung people's based rehabilitation. So I think first is kailangan i-interrogate yung present rehabilitation. Second one is I think sa Mindanao may shared aspirations and experience yung mga kabataan. They wanted inclusive peace, no? At sa ngayon sa Marawi, maraming mga kabataan nagvo-volunteer na sa peace building, no? Kasi nakikita nila yung importante na kailangan nilang sumali or mag-engage sa usaping pangkapayapaan kasi nakikita nila yung malaking role nila sa society. And the third one is kailangan siguro ng exposure kasi nakikita natin hindi lang mga youth sector kasi ang alam natin the problems are interconnected or interrelated. So kailangan may expose din yung kabataan kung ano yung struggle or yung konteksto ng mga farmers, ng mga kababaihan kasi nakikita natin interconnected yung problem. So in order for to have a just society, no, inclusive peace para aware lahat ng mga tao sa baba.
But I think the challenge is, if you're watching this program from the safety of your own bedroom or while stuck in Manila traffic, it's easy to just say, pakialam ko, di ba? What is the Mindanao peace process to me? What does Marawi mean for me if I'm fairly comfortable living outside the conflict zone? So, Ahmad, what would you tell these people who have the luxury of just being apathetic about what's going on?
Before that, miss, sabihin lang about sa liberation. Kasi bothering siya sa akin in a way kasi liberation ba talaga ang nangyari? Sabi mo nga, it's been 2 years. And hindi ko maiwasan tanungin sarili ko na sinasabi na week celebration, ito yung week na celebration ng Marawi Liberation. Pero natatanong ko yung sarili ko, whose liberation are we celebrating for? Is it the IDPs na hindi pa nakakauwi sa main affected area ng mga lubahay nila, ang lupa nila? Or is it yung mga structures na hanggang ngayon hindi pa rin nare-rebuild? So, yun, hindi ko yung maiwasan tanungin. But anyway, as a youth naman, dun nanggagaling ako bilang member of the youth din, gusto ko lang siguro ipahiwatig sa mga katulad ko na nangangarap, gusto ring makatulong, and ginagamit yung sarili nila para makatulong sa usaping kapayapaan. This is all for you. as a youth, we don't just aspire for peace under the cloak of our leaders. Let's also utilize ourselves as resources for that aspiration or for those aspirations. And I believe that our youthfulness, our innocence and idealism is not a hindrance to give life and meaning to the cliche saying or whatever you call it na kabataan ang pag-asa ng bayan. Rather, it is an opportunity to work hard and prove ourselves, showcase to everyone what we are capable of doing while we still have the energy and inspiration. So, as a youth, we must insist on involving ourselves on matters that concern our future. We must integrate ourselves in development programs and invest in our capacities as the hope and future breed of change makers.
And I think we can also start talking about our aspirations for Marawi. I think it's unfair to just talk about Marawi as a conflict zone, as a war zone that's not yet rehabilitated. Hindi yun tama eh. So I'd ask you, Rimar, ano bang pangarap or aspiration mo for Marawi?
I think for me, siguro yung for Marawi liberation or Marawi siege is just part of the protracted conflict in Mindanao. I think more siguro, ano yung aspirations ng kabataan sa Mindanao? Siguro is to be part of the national narrative, no, conversation yung mga kabataan ng Mindanao, sa kabataan sa Mindanao. Kasi nakikita na may othering pa rin, no, until now, yung mga kabataan sa Mindanao. So we wanted na maging parte sa national conversation, no. May sana, no, may sa national politics pa lang, may mga kabataan na from Mindanao. Kasi diyan pa lang makikita na may marginalization kasi kahit sa politics nga, sa national politics, wala masyadong kabataan sa Mindanao. So,
And Tassie, final words.
In terms of aspiration for Marawi, even though I was not raised in Marawi, still the passion and the dream to come back is there. That I hope for a Marawi where there's sustainable peace, where everyone can have access to education, health, and we can recover from this from this battle or the siege that happened in 2017. We know that the recovery will happen for a long time pa. But I hope for a Marawi where the young professionals can come back and showcase their talent and transcend conflict, transcend tribalism, transcend redo, and show that moral leaders can really be exemplary, because we can see a lot of LG leaders right now really showing how they can transform their cities, and we hope really for transformation of Marawi. We know that Marawi is one of the poorest cities in the Philippines, aside from being part of the poorest region in the Philippines, and we have a lot of achievers, professional Muslims or indigenous people, community leaders, and it's not impossible that we can rise up, and we must rise together.
All right, well, thank you to all our guests for generously sharing your time with us. I learned a lot from this conversation, and I think I invite all of our viewers to keep learning with us. There's so much more we need to learn about peace building in Mindanao. But for now, we want to say thank you to Commune Cafe for hosting this conversation, and thank you for watching Meet the Millennials here on CNN Philippines.